Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you on the occasion of the press conference with UN Secretary General and Mr. Nehammer and Mr. Schallenberg. Federal Chancellor, you have the floor. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for us to welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations. Austria is a center of the United Nations. We are proud of that. We cooperate with the UN in an excellent manner. The visit today was marked by the most important topics of our day and age: the war in Ukraine, the possibilities we have as a member state of the European Union on the one hand, and the United Nations on the other hand, have to create peace, to achieve a ceasefire for the people in Ukraine, or to provide humanitarian assistance, to ensure humanitarian corridors, and even more importantly, green corridors. The project is aimed at ensuring that grain, maize, oilseeds can be exported from Ukraine to feed the world. This concerns Northern Africa, India, and other countries. It's a task the community of states have to assume together in close cooperation with the United Nations. Austria will do its utmost to make its contribution and is already when it comes to saving human lives, helping people. 8 million vaccines against COVID were supplied. We are cooperating when it comes to ensuring stability all over the world, and I can promise the Secretary General we will advocate the financing of the ensuring of the financing of the World Food Programme, not only on the part of Austria, but also within the European Union. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, in the course of his visits, pointed out again and again that, first of all, we have to try and help people in the immediate neighborhood, that is Ukraine. More than 158,000 people have already found rescue in Austria. But apart from the war in Ukraine, we must not forget the world. We must not forget the refugee situation in numerous countries. We must not forget millions of people who are threatened by starvation, and it's our obligation, alongside everything we are doing to help Ukraine, together with the United Nations, to provide direct support for the countries in need. Although, for the time being, our European focus is on the conflict between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. The Secretary General and myself met President Putin in recent weeks. We confronted him with the situation in Ukraine in our different roles: the Secretary General as a representative of the world community, I as Federal Chancellor of Austria, a member of the European Union, demanding humanitarian corridors, help for the wounded, to make things a bit easier for people there, and to explore peace perspectives, although we cannot yet speak of peace. Once again, a cordial welcome to Vienna. Today we are having the biggest meeting of the chief executive boards of the United Nations. We're going to engage in an exchange. I look forward to this evening in Belvedere. Mr. Secretary General, you have the floor.
Nehammer, ladies and gentlemen of the press, Honorable Minister. Dear Chancellor, I want to begin by expressing my deep gratitude for your country's generous support to the United Nations and unwavering commitment to multilateralism. And this support and commitment are more critical today than ever. We face multiple and interlinked global crises and the proliferation of conflicts, not least the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is a violation of its territorial integrity and a violation of the Charter of the United Nations. I have been particularly concerned by strikes on urban centers and their impact on civilians, like we have just witnessed on Odessa. The war must end for the sake of the people of Ukraine, Russia, and the entire world. We need to build a world of respect for international law and the UN Charter, a world that protects civilians and offers them a peaceful future on a healthy planet, a world that advances human rights, a world where leaders live up to the values that they have promised to uphold. The United Nations remains intensely focused on ways to expand support for the people of Ukraine, saving lives, reducing suffering, and helping find the path of peace. We will keep pushing for a full-scale ceasefire, effective humanitarian corridors, and safe passage for civilians and life-saving supplies, building on what, together with the International Committee of the Red Cross and the parties, we are able to do in Mariupol. Meanwhile, we have mobilized to prevent the worst impacts of the war beyond Ukraine borders, including containing the specter of regional escalation. I came here from Moldova, where I expressed my gratitude and solidarity for what the Moldovan people has done towards Ukrainian refugees in their hour of greatest needs. 95% of Ukrainian refugees are being welcomed by Moldovans in their homes. But Moldova is fragile and facing interlocking crises, from COVID-19 to security, from high inflation caused by skyrocketing prices of food and energy, to the blockage of its traditional trade routes, namely Odessa. In this context, I appeal to the international community, and taking profit of being here with you, I appeal in particular to the European Union to provide massive support, including budget support, to help preserve Moldova's stability and pursue its ambitious reform agenda. We must also work together to protect refugees from human trafficking, gender-based violence, and other forms of abuse. I thank Austria for welcoming those fleeing violence in Ukraine, for your humanitarian assistance, both through the European Union and bilaterally, and for your support to UN action across the world. Before Moldova, I was in Senegal, Niger, and Nigeria, where they, like developing countries everywhere, are reeling from the cascading challenges of unabated climate emergency, an uneven recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, and the triple crisis of food, energy, and finance exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. And I have to say that I'm deeply concerned, namely with the risks of hunger becoming widespread in different parts of the world because of the dramatic food security situation we are facing because of the war in Ukraine. It is my belief that independently of many other solutions that need to deal with the need to keep markets open, to avoid export bans, to do everything to interfere in the markets to keep prices as low as possible, I do believe that there is no solution for the problem without bringing back to the market the food production of the Ukraine and the food and fertilizer production of the Russian Federation and Belarus. And for my part, as I said this morning with His Excellency the President, I'll be doing everything I can to facilitate the dialogue that can lead to results in this respect. It is encouraging to know that even at this moment of great difficulty, we have steadfast allies in our quest for multilateral solutions. Austria, as a bridge builder between East and West, and the generous host of many United Nations organizations, is such an ally. I always hear from colleagues working in Vienna that the conditions created by the Austrian authorities are so favorable that many decide to retire and go on living here. I think this is the best testimony to the fantastic hospitality of our host city and host country, Vienna and Austria. For all that, I am extremely grateful and I look forward to deepening our strong partnership. Many decades ago, looking back on his life, after he was forced to flee his beloved Austria, Stefan Zweig began his autobiography with a suggestion from Shakespeare: meet the time as it seeks us. In our time, a time of conflicts, climate crisis and COVID-19, there is simply no sustainable alternative to dialogue, international cooperation and global solutions. Danke.
Sehr geehrter Generalsekretär, sehr geehrter Bundeskanzler, lieber Karl, meine
Secretary General, Mr. Federal Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, I can only endorse what the Chancellor said. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to Vienna, but not only you, because we are currently meeting the entire chief executive boards in Vienna, all organizations of the UN is currently in Vienna, and we're happy to be their host. It's the first time since 2019 that they are meeting face-to-face in Vienna, the easternmost center of the United Nations in Europe, on a continent that is experiencing a war. This is a particularly strong signal sent by the United Nations, and it will be received as such. The world is exhausted after 2 years of pandemic, climate crisis, migration flows, Ethiopia, Myanmar, Afghanistan, and now the heinous face of war on our continent, something we would never have thought is possible. And the shock waves reach the entire globe, as you said. Food security, energy prices, wheat prices, the supply of the basic necessities of life. We are experiencing a conflict in Europe, but we shouldn't be Eurocentric. We have to understand what the crisis is doing to the entire world, and the Western community of states and the European Union in general has a special responsibility. You mentioned Moldova. I myself, together with my Czech and Slovak colleagues, did visit Moldova. This is very much on our agenda, as well as the disruptive implications on the Western Balkans and the Southern Caucasus. But with all the crises we are currently experiencing, the answer has to be a common answer. We have to be aware of the fact that the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine is an attack against the UN Charter, against the foundation of what was built after the Second World War, respect of sovereignty, a ban on violence, equality, and we're all called upon to defend this international system with the United Nations at its core. And we're grateful to you for having established the Global Crisis Response Group, and you will find a reliable partner for this work in Austria. When we look around in the world, if we didn't have the United Nations, we would have to invent it right now. Looking back in history, a few months after we regained our full sovereignty, the first important step of this country was to join the United Nations, and our commitment to multilateralism has been a constant factor of our foreign policy. It's about our own security, about our survival, and now we're called upon to pursue this difficult path in the years and decades to come. Since 1960, we had 160,000 blue helmets of the United Nations. We're proud of being one of the centers of the United Nations, and I use the occasion, as I did already earlier, to announce that Austria is going to assume the costs of the necessary renovation of the UN Center in Vienna. This is money well invested, money invested in the future of the UN, the future of our UN Center. It's something that contributes to diversity, to our security, and last but not least, it is an important economic factor for Vienna and Eastern Austria. And we feel greatly honored that many generations of UN staff will feel at home in Austria, and we will be happy to welcome many more of them. So count on us also in the future. Thank you very much. We have together for reasons of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Chancellor. You both mentioned the necessity of humanitarian corridors and corridors for food supply and the transport of these goods. Can you tell us, are any talks going on? Are you in personal contact by telephone with the Russian president? Where are these talks being held? What can we expect for the future? Mr. Chancellor, Mr. Secretary General, you both visited Moscow and Kiev. Do you think your visits to Vladimir Putin made sense at all? And Mr. Secretary General, do you think it makes sense for as many representatives of countries to go to Moscow, or is it better if you do so as a multilateral representative?
The first question was, sorry, I didn't understand the first question. Makes sense, the first?
Yeah, whether it made sense at all to go there.
Yeah.
For both of you.
Please. After the evacuation of civilians from Mariupol, Azovstal, we are in contact with the Ukrainian and the Russian authorities in order to multiply the initiatives similar to this. These contacts are going on. Our policy was, if you remember, we only announced each of the evacuations after it was completed. There have been many spoilers in relation to this issue, and we will not be helping spoilers. So we will do more operations of the same kind, I'm sure, but we will keep them not public until they are completed, as we have done with the Mariupol operation. And at the same time, I've been in intense contacts both with the Russian Federation, with Ukraine, with Turkey, and with several other key countries in order to try to address seriously the problems of food security. But once again, I do not intend to make public any of the initiatives I'm having until they produce a result. Because if this becomes something to be discussed globally, I'm sure that we will not be able to achieve anything. But this is a main concern that I have now, and I've been in the last 2 weeks multiplying my contacts for this objective, and we have a working group in the United Nations working hard to provide technical support to all the contacts I've been making. Now, if you want to solve a problem, you need to deal with those that cause the problem or that can solve the problem. So it makes full sense to talk to the leader of the Russian Federation. It makes full sense to talk to any other relevant actors in the present crisis. And I have to say that I believe that these contacts have an important role in allowing us to understand motivations, objectives, and so to be more effective in our own initiatives. But on the other hand, we sometimes manage to have concrete results. And I think the lives that were rescued, of civilians that were in the bunkers of Mariupol, deserve that I meet anybody in any part of the world without having any doubt that that is the right thing to do.
Zu der Frage betreffend der grünen Korridore.
As regards the question of the green corridors, it's important for the European Union, together with the United Nations, cooperate. Austria is involved within the framework of EU missions in order to get grain, wheat, maize, and oil seeds out of Ukraine. It's difficult because the ports are blocked, and on land routes the required quantities cannot be transported. Nevertheless, each and every ton of wheat or oil seeds leaving Ukraine is 1 ton more for countries like Northern Africa, India, and Pakistan. I fully endorse what the Secretary General said. There will never be too many talks, and I'm glad that the United Nations act as a very important partner. The European Union is a clearly positioned partner, siding with Ukraine. 27 member states adopted sanctions against the Russian Federation, and I agree with the Secretary General. It's important to be in contact with both parties to a conflict. In this case, Russia is the aggressor and Ukraine is the victim. We have to continue talking because the ceasefire, which people really deserve in Ukraine, will be decided not by weapons, but through dialogue. Thank you very much. For reasons of time, we have to end the press conference now. Thank you very much.
Please follow me.
This way.